Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Our Small Footprint. My name is Nissa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. We do our grocery shopping every 6 weeks, and because of that, there is a lot of food prep, freezer, meal prep, all that sort of thing that has to go in the first 7 to 10 days of the shopping trip. A couple of months ago, I started sharing sort of daily videos of how I managed to get all that food into the fridges, freezers, jars and all that sort of thing to make sure that it lasts us for this full 6 weeks, and everyone really enjoyed it. So that is what this one is. This is November's daily series of me sort of figuring out what to do. The roosters are saying good morning. What to do with all the food to make sure that it lasts us for that 6 weeks and beyond. So some of the stuff I buy in bulk definitely lasts us more than the 6 weeks, and some of it is purely for the 6 weeks. But ways that I manage to extend the life to make sure that we have enough over the 6 weeks and further on. So today was blueberries. I managed to score some really cheap blueberries, but they were last week's stock, and so there was some mold in a few of them and things like that, and I really needed to get them sorted before they went bad, because I don't want them to go bad. That's the whole point, is that things that I buy cheap, it's not cheap if they go bad. It's only cheap if I use them in an appropriate manner. So today is blueberries. I froze a whole bunch of them, I canned a bunch of them, and I'm sharing the process of canning them with you, and then in a couple of days I will bake something or make something with one of the jars as well, and I'll share that with you as well. So enjoy watching, and I will see you again tomorrow. Thanks, guys. One of the first tasks that had to be done once we got back was the blueberries. So I managed to get 4 boxes, 4 flats with 12 punnets each for $6 a flat. So each punnet was only about 50 cents each. These are last week's stock, so some of them had a little bit of mold in some of the punnets and things like that, so I had to be aware of that when I bought them, and that was fine. I was aware of that, and that was okay. So I put them in an esky instead of just on the back of the ute, because I didn't want to create any more issues. And then when I got home, after I filmed the grocery haul, I stuck them in a big bowl with about a half a cup of vinegar to about 4 litres of water, and gave them all a really good wash, picked out any that were bad and things like that, and then I stuck them in the fridge, because obviously I didn't have time to do anything with them that day. But I did need to do something with them fairly quickly. So what I did was I decided to can some. I did freeze a whole bunch on big baking trays, and I did let the kids eat a whole bunch fresh as well, but the rest I decided to can. So I made an extra light sugar syrup. You can can these with just water, but the sugar does help with maintaining the flavour a little bit, and it does help with maintaining the colour as well, so they just look a little bit nicer, and the taste is a little bit more pronounced, because the water will wash some of that flavour out. Now I intend to use the juice in there as well when I use them, but still adding that little bit of sugar is beneficial for this. So you just dissolve your sugar in your water and add some lemon juice. I just googled to see around about how much liquid I would need for the quantity of berries that I had, and went by that. It seemed a little excessive, but I followed it for this particular point, and it did end up being a bit too much, but I managed to use it in the end. Once the sugar is dissolved, I added the blueberries. So I'd washed them and sorted them, pulled as many stems and stuff off as I could find, and all the rest of it. And then I had, as said, frozen a tray. Kids had eaten a whole lot as well. So this was what was left by the next day, and it just needed something doing with it. I didn't want to risk them going bad. So I added all the blueberries that I had left into this extra light sugar syrup, and then let them simmer for a little bit. You can raw pack your berries. You can just fill your jars with berries and pour hot liquid over the top, but I like to put them in the liquid so that they cook a little bit, which is going to stop them from floating as bad. It's going to give you fuller jars. So I put them into the extra light syrup because I prefer the look of the jars when it's done that way. I did mash them a little bit with the potato masher, just because I wanted to release plenty of the juice into the sauce, and the way I'm going to use these is not going to matter that they're not whole, so that was fine. So I gave them a little bit of a mash in the pot with the extra light sugar syrup before putting them in the jars. So for today I used Fowler's number 20 jars, which are about 600 mils. They're one of the smaller common Fowler's jars, so I have quite a few of these ones. And I filled the jars with the berries first. Now, I filled the jars to the fill line with the berries and got sort of 6 jars full, and then had some berries left and sort of half filled 3 jars. I think in future I probably will only half fill the jars if I ever have the opportunity to get berries this cheap again. Half fill the jars with the fruit and then just fill up the rest with the liquids. The berries did swell quite a lot and use up a lot of space in the jar, and you ended up with them protruding a little bit from the top of the liquid because of the quantity of them, and I think it would be prettier, but also they would have a better life on the shelf if they were all submerged better. So I think I would put a lot less berries per jar when I do this next time, but I haven't canned berries on their own before, so I've only ever made it into a sauce and canned the sauce. So I filled the jars with the berries to the fill line. I did, as I said, 6 which were pretty much full and 3 which were sort of half full, and then top it up with the syrup. So I just used a ladle to pour the syrup over it to bring it to the relevant fill lines for the jars. You only need a headspace of half an inch or a quarter of an inch for this sort of a thing. I'm a little generous with headspace in the Fowler's jars because they narrow so much at the neck, so I find I get some severe siphoning if I take it too close to the tip with these narrower necked jars in a boiling water canning bath. So I tend to be a little bit generous with the headspace on these because of that. So top it up with the syrup to the relevant headspace, and then I debubbled it. I could not find my debubbling tool, of course, because that would be too easy, so I used the back end of a narrow spatula to debubble it. It didn't need a whole lot because the berries were cooked in the liquid anyway. But you just want to make sure you've got no excessive bubbles in there because it can impact the processing of the jars. So I debubbled that as much as possible. I cleaned all the rims with white vinegar with a cloth, and with the Fowler's jars the rubber ring is going to go around the outside edge, not on the top, so I make sure to clean the outside edge as well as the top and clean the whole rim section. I then put the rubber rings on the jars. Now, some people put the rubber rings on before they fill the jars because they don't want to be putting it on hot jars. I can completely understand that, but I didn't realize you could do that initially, and so I've always put it on hot jars, and I've sort of got a bit of a technique down pat now, so I find it fairly easy. It does mean, though, that I tend to double wash the rims of my jars. So I vinegar wash the rims of the jars, put the rubber ring on, and then I vinegar wash the ring because I've just handled that ring with greasy hands potentially, or sugar on my hands or anything like that. So I like to make sure that the ring itself is nice and clean as well. But sort of that begs the whole thing that if I had to put the rings on first and then filled the jars, would there be food in between the rings and the jars? And that would cause issues with seals too. So I don't know, personal preference. I like to wash the rims, put the rings on, and then give the rings a little bit of a wipe as well. That's just the way that I do it, but it is not necessarily the right way. I've got stainless steel lids, so these stainless steel lids are the reusable part, the rubber rings are the single-use part, and the stainless steel lids are the reusable ones. So I like to wipe the insides of them with vinegar as well because they're stored in little containers, but I have an outside kitchen, we're off-grid, everything gets a bit dusty and dirty, so whilst they get rinsed before I use them, in the hot water that I wash the jars in, I like to give them a quick wipe out with vinegar as well, especially in product that's not going to make any difference. Like a bit of vinegar in these blueberry jars is not going to make any difference whatsoever. So I'm wondering if I remembered that I added lemon juice to the berries as well, if I mentioned that. It is in the video, but I don't know if I actually verbally mentioned it. So I added lemon juice to this as well. You don't actually need to. The acid of blueberries is fine, but I like to add a little bit of lemon juice as well. So that little bit of vinegar is not going to make any difference, is more what I was getting to. So put the lids on, and then we use a clip to hold the lids in place. So instead of a ring, it uses a clip. So I place the clips nice and square on the jars, ready to go. I put them into the water bath canner. This is my Buffalo canner. You remember that because the jars are hot, you need hot water in your canner. So I put hot water in the canner, hot jars into the hot water. Now, when I got to this point, I realized that I had a whole lot of leftover liquid. So it definitely had more liquid than needed, but I also think that if I had have only half filled the jars with berries and then topped it up with liquid, I probably would have got twice the amount of jars, which would have used more liquid as well. So that might have evened out. So it might be just that I overdid the berries in the jars. So I will test, as I said, if I get the opportunity to get berries again like this, I'm going to definitely test that theory out. But I ended up with a whole lot of excess liquid, and I'm not going to waste it. It was bright blue, it was mildly blueberry flavored, and pleasant. So what I did was I added some more sugar to it and added some more lemon juice to it and turned it into a bit of a cordial. The kids will enjoy it with ice water over summer or with SodaStream and things like that. It's not very strong. The blueberry is definitely mild, and it does have a bit of a tang to it because I added a decent amount of lemon juice to acidify the liquid, but the kids enjoy that sort of thing. So I think that it'll go down well. So I decided to just do that and pour the liquid into the ghee jars, which are the 1 litre jars that we use for a lot of this sort of thing, so that because I had room in the canner anyway. So I filled 2 1 litre jars with that cordial liquid, and the kids can have that over summer when it's hot, or Daryl and I can have it as well, or it can go in SodaStream, whatever. It will get used in some way. So the berries, so once the extra jars are in there, I topped the water up to about 1.5 inches above the jars, and then brought it to a rolling boil. And once it's at a rolling boil, I think the minimum canning time on these was 15 minutes. I did them for 20 because I had the cordial jars in there as well, and our altitude is above 1,000 feet. So I water bathed them for 20 minutes, and once they were, after that 20 minutes, I let them sit for 5 minutes or however long it took for them to the boil to go off, and then I put them out on the bench to sit for 24 hours before moving them onto the pantry. So the intent with these jars is that they can be made into blueberry syrup for having with like pancakes and stuff. So especially those jars that don't have as many solids in them, if I just tipped them into a pan and warmed it up with a little bit of cornstarch, or even just cooked it down for long enough so it thickened up, and then used it as a syrup for over pancakes or Dutch baby pancake, or I could use it as the berries could be used in muffins. There'd be really nice moist berries used in muffins. I make an apple custard crumble thing that is a quirky cooking recipe, and if it has frozen berries in it, I think normally, and a can of these would work really well in that too. I could thicken it up and use it as a blueberry pie filling, which might be interesting. We've never had blueberry pie. You don't normally get blueberries this abundantly to be able to look at storing them, because you normally only get a few punnets here and there and the kids will just eat them. So it was a really nice thing to get this many, to experiment with a few different ways of using them. Adding more fruit to the shelf is always a wonderful thing to do. So we're going to use these in a few different ways and see how they go, and I'll share them as I do. But in the meantime, we've got berries frozen in the freezer to use for smoothies, these 9 jars of berries and 2 jars of blueberry cordial, and the kids also got the treat of eating a whole lot of punnets just fresh. So, that works out really well. So thank you for joining me again today, and I hope this helped anyone who was wondering what to do with all those berries in berry season, and I will see you again tomorrow.